And finally, we have step and shoes depreciation. And, a reminder to those who are not tax attorneys themselves, if this all sounds complicated and complex, that's okay. That's part of the value that a good qualified intermediary can provide. We help you manage these assets and help you find value.
Well, and a really good point, Sam, and that's why when you're going out and actually evaluating like-kind exchanges, it's just not about selecting a qualified intermediary that can hold your cash. It's about someone understanding all the benefits around a like-kind exchange, step in the shoes being one of them. Step in the shoes is actually enjoyed by companies that do a like-kind exchange where they sell an asset that hasn't been fully depreciated on the tax side. And you perform a like-kind exchange, you roll that those proceeds into a new asset. The rules around step in the shoes say you can continue depreciating the old asset that you sold as if it was never sold. So you enjoy the depreciation on an asset that was rolled over in a like-kind exchange, plus you get depreciation on any new cash you have coming in. An incredible opportunity for car rental companies that are selling assets every 2 years. They're seeing increased cash flow from like-kind exchange and step in the shoes that they've never enjoyed before because they're seeing years 3, 4, and 5 actually enjoying that depreciation. And everyone knows depreciation is offset of income. And that's an extra cash flow benefit to your company.
And as that last bullet point there notes, just because you're in NOLs, that doesn't mean you're out of business. It doesn't mean that you're not planning for the future. It doesn't mean that you no longer have strategy. NOL doesn't mean you're not buying.
Nope. The companies that we say that we're in NOLs right now and we're not going to do anything, those are the companies that are probably going to be closed in the next several years. The companies that recognize net operating losses as just a point in time and we're moving out of that and they're planning for 2 years, 3 years out, those are the ones that are going to come out so strong and they're going to have a competitive advantage in their marketplace like no one else has.
Yeah, to use a sports analogy, if you're an offensive coordinator in football, you don't like those situations where you're 3rd and 25, but you certainly do have plays drawn up for 3rd and 25, don't you?
That's exactly right. You don't pack it in and say, let's go, let's head to the locker room.
That's it, guys, we're done. Okay, a little more detail perhaps. How do 1031 exchanges work? We know that this is a tax code, which means there are bound to be rules.
Yeah, and there are. And one of the things we talk about with like-kind exchange is something that we refer to as form over substance. What that means is you've got to set the rules up front, and then the substance has to follow. This isn't one of those parts of the tax code that says, oh, I intended to do this, or, oh, I should have done this, or I've sold an asset and here's what I meant to do. The IRS, I think, has very little room for being critical on that. They're very structured.
No mulligans.
No mulligans on this one. It's pay the taxes and try it again next year. So what you do with this is you structure a like-kind exchange up front prior to your sale. You get in touch with a qualified intermediary like Accruit and say, I want to sell this here in the future. What do I need to do? So there's an agreement that we need to sign that assigns the rights. There's some notifications that go out there. You also need to get involved with a qualified intermediary. If you're going to be doing what is called a deferred exchange, where it's going to be over a span of multiple months, you need to get a third-party qualified intermediary involved, and that's who you sign the agreement with. You do have some critical days. You have a 45-day identification period that basically says if I've sold an asset and I haven't replaced it within 45 days, I have to make a formal identification to say these are the assets that I will take on within 180 days. And what you do on that identification is you find like assets that you may buy. So this is a great opportunity in our tax code that says, look, we'll give you some time to replace this. We're not going to give you 6 years. We're going to give you 6 months if you do this right, if you want to stay within safe harbor. And again, you can't come in at day 47 and say, here's my identification, or let me keep this for 200 days. The qualified intermediary is there to make sure you're holding those appropriately.
Now, we're talking about like-kind exchanges as though it's one thing, but in fact there are different kinds of like-kind exchanges. The first one is the simplest form, but it's also one that I think is frequently misunderstood, and I worry that there are people out there who are doing it wrong in a way that would not be good for them if the IRS found out about it. Is that correct?
Yeah, a simultaneous exchange is a swap. You have something I want, I have something you want, let's just trade. Maybe no economic benefit on each side. Your value is equal to my value. Let's make sure it happens on the same day and we're done. Don't need a third-party qualified intermediary involved. What we see a lot of people do is they confuse trade-ins with like-kind exchanges. And a trade-in is fine, and you can use it as a like-kind exchange as long as it occurs on the same tax day. It can't occur over 2 days. It can't occur over the next 2 months. You can't hold a credit with someone you're trading this in over the next 2 months and use that credit off to get the benefit for the federal tax deferral. You may all day long, you have to check with your tax advisors, but you may be able to get the sales tax benefit, but you cannot classify that as a 1031 exchange. To do a 1031 exchange over a period of time, that's the next one called a forward delayed exchange. That's the one that has the period up to 6 months, 180 days. You must use a qualified intermediary involved. The proceeds of the sale must be held with certain restrictions. So you've got to make sure that those proceeds, let's say even on a trade-in, you've got to monetize that trade-in and hold those proceeds with certain restrictions. You just can't hold it as credit with somebody. Again, it may work on your sales tax, but it's not going to hold up very well if the IRS says, let me see that transaction. So the forward delayed exchange is what we saw better guidance in the early 90s that they came out with and said, this is how you structure a 1031 forward exchange.
Now this next one, occasionally companies will find themselves in a situation where they'd like to do an exchange, but for one reason or another, they can't sell first and buy later. Maybe they haven't identified a purchaser. Maybe they're in a situation where they need to continue using that asset until they get the new asset in place. And for those people, there's a solution as well.
Yeah, and the reverse exchanges we've seen just explode in this type of economy because we look at it as very opportunistic. Piece of equipment, piece of land, type of vehicle, I can't do without, or the price is so attractive, I got to take advantage of it. And what we'll do is try to sell the other asset after that, after you acquire that. Different structure. You just can't use a qualified intermediary. You must set up a different type of company. But there are several qualified intermediaries out there, including Accruit, that know how to structure a reverse exchange. A lot of the same rules apply, but there's also other guidance that it's been provided to us that sets the rules for a reverse exchange. If you want to stay within the safe harbor exchange. We see a lot of people doing it with airplanes or fleets of specialized vehicles. I need to go buy that, but I need some prep time. And you're exactly right. Most businesses need the other asset producing revenue for them while the other asset is getting prepared.
And we're also seeing a situation now with the federal stimulus package rolling out. There are companies out there who are in one line of business who may be looking at stimulus opportunities and thinking, you know, we've been building houses and we think we should be doing roads, or we've been building roads and we think we need to get into the bridge business. Reverse exchange can be a very powerful strategy to help you transition your business over a relatively short period of time, because you don't have to go out and sell all of your equipment that you use for one type of work and then buy the equipment that you need for another type of work if it's a different equipment.
Right, as long as it's still like kind.
Exactly.
And that's what we really want to make sure. So going from one industry to another may be okay.
May or may not.
As long as the classifications are the same.
Exactly.